Given his mental incapacity, the American people deserve to know who was running the country the last 4 years. Today, as we seek to answer this question, it is deeply disappointing but not surprising that most Democrats on this committee have chosen to all but boycott the hearing and have failed to call a single witness. They have chosen to ignore this issue like they ignored President Biden's decline. Their absence speaks volumes, an implicit admission that the truth is too inconvenient to face. By refusing to engage in this critical examination, they abdicate their responsibility to the American people. This de facto boycott is not just a refusal to participate, it's a refusal to serve the American people who deserve answers about who is truly leading their government. President Biden's decline did not suddenly begin in June of 2024. It was a persistent and obvious truth that was evident for years to anyone who was willing to see it. This reality did not require special insider knowledge or investigative reporting to uncover. We didn't need Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson to tell us what millions of Americans could freely observe with their own eyes. The truth was glaringly obvious. Anyone who was paying attention could tell that the emperor had no clothes.
I believe there is a constitutional crisis. It's the collapse of Congress asserting its Article I authority to make decisions about the well-being of the American people. What has this Senate debated in the months that we've been here, other than nominations? Have we discussed the possible war with Iran? Have we had a serious discussion on the floor about the massive and mounting debt? Have we had any discussion about the abdication of congressional spending authority by the impoundment actions of an administration? Have we had a discussion about climate change that is causing havoc throughout the world? What we've done is gone to the floor and haven't debated. We've gone to the floor and voted on nominations. There's another issue of great concern to me, because I have enormous respect for my colleagues. Each and every one of us who was elected, it's the highest honor of our life. Each and every one of us came here because it is in our bones that we want to try to do something beneficial and make life better for the people we represent. And we have different points of view. But instead of this Congress debating those different points of view about oil exploration, or about clean energy, about a good healthcare system, what we do is turn that debate into personal accusations of motivations, of cover-up, of conspiracy, of bad character, of demeaning folks who disagree with us. So we never get to the discussion about how do we have a healthcare system that works for the people in Texas, the people in Louisiana, and the people in Vermont. We never get to the discussion about, are we going to deny the reality of what we know is true, climate change, and how do we address that in a way that maintains a strong economy and actually builds a strong economy? We get into the accusations that if you disagree with me, you're a left-wing radical. We get into these discussions that if you disagree with me, you're a Marxist. We get into these discussions that fan the perception of the people we all represent, who desire nothing more than be able to take care of the families, live with some security, make a contribution in the communities where they live. That if a person disagrees with you, they are a bad person. We will get nowhere with that approach. Now, so many of the things that happened in the Biden administration, I totally supported, and many of you totally opposed. Those are policy disagreements. He came in with COVID. We got through COVID. We can debate about how we did it, but that was an accomplishment. The American Rescue Plan, we had the biggest jobs creation in the history of the country. The CHIPS and Science Act, acknowledging that we have to have a strong economy and be able to have the best chips here manufactured in the United States. We did that. The Federal Disaster Program, improved significantly. And I can go on. And I'll take up something where we didn't do well, and that's immigration. You won that argument. But does it mean that those who disagreed with you and along the way were bad people, should be labeled Marxist, should be condemned? The American people ultimately gets to decide. But to the extent that we have a responsibility that we share, Republicans and Democrats, whichever side of the issue you're on, is to debate the issue and not debase the people who are in the debate. That's what I see as the crisis that we're facing in this Congress. Our refusal to engage in the serious discussion about the issues that are having such an impact on the people we represent.
The Biden White House's widespread use of an Autopen to affix President Biden's signatures to documents that exercise executive powers belonging solely to the president poses significant constitutional, legal, and practical considerations. Once the president's signature is copied and loaded into the Autopen, the machine can sign documents as the president himself would. To be blunt, by using the Autopen, anyone can sign documents as the president himself. Now, to be clear, I'm not here today to suggest that the Autopen is bad. It's just technology. I'm here today because of questions concerning President Biden's capacity and whether the Autopen was used to usurp presidential power or to conceal the president's decline. As the sitting president's mental acuity declined, potentially to the point of incapacitation, his administration's expansion of the powers of the presidency raises more questions than answers. Any investigation into this matter should focus not only on whether President Biden directed or authorized subordinate staff to take action in certain instances, but whether he had the capacity to do so at all. The 25th Amendment lays out clear procedures for what to do when the president is incapacitated. It was carefully drafted and informed by our nation's history. The Biden administration ignored it all to aggrandize executive power and push the country further in their preferred ideological direction. It is our obligation at this point to get to the bottom of these issues and to ask the important question as to whether or not the Autopen and other devices were used to cover and obscure President Biden's mental decline, undermining our national security and also the Constitution. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning.
This is incredibly important. I mean, you look at what the administration did, you look at what the Democratic Party did, you look at what the legacy media did. It is absolutely inexcusable. It is not only dangerous, it's disgusting. And the American people deserve better. And the fact that we have none of my Democratic colleagues over here, that this entire dais is empty, that what they allowed to happen, that they are not interested in correcting it for the future is absolutely mind-blowing. And so when we're looking at what Joe Biden did while he was in office, you have a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, leaving equipment, leaving allies, changing the way the world viewed us. You look at an emboldened Russia, Iran. You look at what happened, obviously, with China and those conversations with Joe Biden. You look at millions flooding across our border. You look at a ton of unaccompanied children coming across, hundreds of thousands. You look at hundreds of thousands of Americans dead because of fentanyl poisoning. You look at record high inflation. Who was in charge? And the fact that not one Democrat colleague can show up and try to get answers to that, I hope the American people see that for exactly what it is. And so my questions to you is, how do we prevent this in the future? So we know that the 25th Amendment in the 1960s, we take a look at that. Section 4 was purposefully vague to allow for some flexibility. Clearly, it either didn't work or we have some people we need to hold accountable for not stepping up. So I want to know from you all, what do we need to do? Do you think that there need to be more guardrails when it comes to Section 4? Do you think that we need some more standards to evaluate that? And if so, what should those standards be? And Professor Harrison, I'd like to start with you.
Senator, this is the question about further implementation of the Section 4 is one that has not received a lot of attention because fortunately, the country has not needed it very often. I think that this is a situation in which Congress's power is pretty limited because the Constitution by design put a somewhat vague but nevertheless meaningful concept,
think
which
it-
is ability on the part of the president
Right,
to
and it
act
also means
in the
good
hands of a
faith.
political process. That's the
Yes,
last thing
and
I'll
good
say.
faith.
Yes.
And I don't
Yeah,
think,
yes.
obviously, we don't have that here. Mr. Ward, do you have any opinion on that?
Yes, Senator. So you said, should we hold folks accountable and should there be some reforms? The
Yeah.
answer would be both.
Right.
Yes. So your colleague on the Democrat side who did attend, Senator Welch, said, hey, this is just kind of retrospective. We need to move on. I would strenuously disagree with that. The only ability to move forward is if there's an accounting of what was undertaken under the Biden staff, the Biden personnel, the bureaucrats, and the cabinet. And one thing I'll just say is this very issue was debated by Republicans in 1988 in the Miller Commission report at the University of Virginia. Republicans had the open and honest, transparent discussion about the end of the Reagan presidency and whether or not there were other guardrails that needed to be imposed on the 25th Amendment. Some discussions were about the inclusion of a mental health professional on the White House medical team, whether the Surgeon General should oversee the inclusion of medical reporting as part of Section 4, Clause 4 of the 25th Amendment. All I'll say is all of those things have been set aside. There has been no legitimate discussion in the years since about how to make the 25th Amendment more robust and how it could actually operate in the instance that the president
Right, and do we
lacked
need to
capacity.
more clearly define what unable means in the 25th Amendment?
Oh, I think most certainly, and I think there should be. Look, the other issue, and a number of legal academics, former colleagues of Professor Harrison, have taken this up over the years. I mean, Professor Calabresi wrote about this 20 years ago, that there needs to be a more precise definition, and there are lots of issues related to succession.
There clearly does, because, I mean, even from all of us from the outside, we're saying there is a problem. And the fact that we could get no one on the inside to actually take a look at what they already knew to exist and then be able to hold them accountable, we have to have other guardrails moving forward. And that is absolute. So we need to be talking today about what those guardrails are. I have a question. I'm running out of time. It's two things. One, senior staff. So I have been a senior staff member. You take an oath when you get to come and work in this body. You want to make sure you're doing what's best for the United States of America, for the state you serve, all of the things. Is there any way to hold senior staff accountable for either helping to cover up and or moving people to the side? Because it is clear that there are people within this administration that saw that, and they should be sitting in front of us today answering the question of why they turned their back on America, because that's exactly what they did. And so whether it's secretaries, whether it's people in the administration, or whether it is senior staff, we deserve some accountability and we deserve some answers. And then my last question will be for Mr. Spicer, legacy media. How in the world do we hold them accountable? If all of us on the outside can see it and we are saying, get to the bottom of this, but yet they refuse, what mechanism should we put in place to be able to hold them accountable for not actually following what is clearly in front of them?
Senator, you're asking the right question. When it comes to accountability, it can't be overstated. When the Biden White House stripped 440 White House hard passes from independent journalists, they were attempting to control the narrative, to make sure that no one who wanted to hold them accountable was silenced. Part of what I think this administration has done so well is bringing in new voices, people from disparate backgrounds of all sorts, to ask the White House press secretary, to ask the senior staff, and to be able to hold them accountable. Part of it is allowing other voices in the media. We've seen what the legacy media did, but that's why I think the growth of independent media is so healthy for our democracy, and we need more of it, not less.
Thank you. And then the senior staff question, please.
Yeah, look, Senator, I mean, senior staff from the first Trump administration were brought in before committees and investigated for their participation in drafting the president's remarks on January 6th, for drafting a speech. So if there was an effort by senior staff, the Politburo, as they seem to like to have called themselves, if they were purposely distancing cabinet members, evading difficult Q&A with press, all as an attempt to conceal the president's mental acuity, yes, they should be held accountable.
Thank you.
If you go back through our history, Senator, so Grover Cleveland, Wilson, FDR, JFK, President Johnson, President Biden, it's almost a Democrat sport to keep from the American people the health and acuity of the chief executive. They've been doing this for a long time, but this is of another level, especially as Mr. Spicer was mentioning, the complicity of the national media in obscuring this, but also that cabinet officers would go to the lengths of avoiding interacting with the chief executive because they were fearful that they would have to speak to his diminished capacity.
And I'm running out of time, and it was of particular concern that the media seemed to never ask him about executive actions and policy. Favorite flavor of ice cream? Yes. Why he was pushing dangerous criminals into the interior of this nation? No. And that is why I think this hearing was so very important. What was coming out of this administration was a radical wish list, and certainly you can see it, what has happened and the consequences playing out right now. And now I